Okay, this is part two. I'll show you down inside the plane, start with the power, how I actually got the power to light all the LEDs. What I did was, this is the connector where the battery actually connects in, the connector, and then here's the ESC. And what I did was, I spliced in two wires into this point right here to get power. Went into a JST connector, into the actual into an on-off switch. So I showed you to turn the power on and off to the lights, and then out of the switch, these with two wires, and at that point, I soldered onto each, like the positive wire, I soldered on three other positive wires. In other words, I took one wire, changed it into three. Did the same thing for the negative. One wire out of the on-off switch, and then changed into, added three wires from that point. And the reason for that is I then took one of the plus of those 6 wires total, I took a plus and a minus wire, ran it and connected it to a JST connector, glued, and I epoxied it into the plane here, the one half of the connector. And then I did the same thing on the other side. So I got, of those 6 wires, 2 wires went here, plus and a minus, 2 wires went here, plus and a minus, and then the other 2 wires ran from in the opening here, the access opening. I actually had to do some cutting in here, had to take the motor off and do a little boring out, but I was able then to fish the plus and the minus wire for the back of the plane, and came through this opening right here. Now I'll explain to you the wiring itself into the LEDs. Okay, so I had power coming out of the plane here, and on the other side, and the top of the fuselage right underneath the motor. And here, then I connected 2 wires to the JST connector, and then those 2 wires then were soldered onto this strip of LEDs right here. And this strip then was soldered, had a wire, 2 wires, a plus and a minus, soldered to the end of this strip. The other ends of those 2 wires soldered to this strip, so that had the power coming from the plane all the way through here. Now the power is running up through this. I had 2 wires which connected to the end here and went around to the top of the wing, where it's connected into this strip of wire of LED, and then on up, and 2 more wires connecting this set of LEDs to this and over, and this is where it's terminated right at this point. And then, of course, same thing with this other side. The power comes from the little JST connector. Then I got the other JST connector here, 2 wires out to the LEDs along the bottom, and all the way around the power flows, comes up and terminates here, same as on the other side of the wing. After fishing in the back, after fishing the 2 wires through, then the power is flowing through this set of LEDs, and then off of the back of this set of LEDs, I actually soldered in, and I've got two negative wires coming out and 2 positive wires coming out of this, with a negative and a positive going to each side of the horizontal stabilizer, the underneath side of that. And then basically did exactly the same thing from the underneath side of the horizontal stabilizer. I connected in, made the soldering, soldered 2 wires to this LED, 2 more solders, actually 2 more wires soldered in here. So that made the flow of the electricity flow from here through this one, and then up and over to the top side, where continued on here, 2 more solders, and then again terminating right here. I suppose I could have had just a black, a positive and a negative coming out of the back of this, and then connecting, going straight over to this side, flowing around here, and then I could have cut a little hole, I guess, underneath this rudder and had this instead of a piece. Now it kind of looks like it might go under the rudder, but I guarantee you it doesn't. It just goes to right here and stops. So instead of having this piece just this long, I could have had it long enough that it went under the rudder, out on this side, and then the juice flowing on through here and around and terminating on the bottom. Could have done that, but I guess I probably didn't want at the time. I don't remember the reason, but I don't think I wanted to cut underneath that wing, because I knew it is glued in at the bottom, so I probably didn't want to weaken that. So anyhow, that's how the lights are all connected together. One little thing that I did, which you can see here quite easily, is that this strip, I knew when I put these strips on that I might want to adjust, like move this strip a little this way or that way, and the same for this one. So what I did was, as opposed to just having 2 straight wires here, I took the wires and put a little curlicue in them so that I had some flexibility insofar as moving and adjusting and putting them exactly where I wanted it. So that's what the little loop is for there. Now, on the bottom side, you saw when I had the plane up in the air that the bottom side was quite bright, actually no different than the top side. And this tape, this masking tape that I've got on here, it doesn't seem to alter the brightness of the LEDs at all. And the reason I got this tape on here is because when I come in for a landing, I don't want something to... This is just a little more protection for the LEDs on the bottom side of this wing. And it did the same thing back on the horizontal stabilizer. And again, it doesn't seem to... It doesn't degrade the brightness of the LEDs whatsoever. So I would suggest that if you put lights on the bottom side of your wing and you don't have wheels for landing, which this plane doesn't, that you put some masking tape over it to protect them. The other thing I'd like to tell you at this point is the LEDs themselves are pretty tough. One thing that happened to me, back in this area, I had this strip connected, and I just had, at the point before I connected 2 wires here, 2 pluses and 2 minuses. I just had 2 single bare wires soldered on right here. And unbeknownst to me, I was working on the plane up somewhere up in the front area, and all of a sudden this particular string of LEDs started actually smoking, and startled me. And man, I got to get the power off, so I reached up to the front here, got a hold of the battery and disconnected it. This then, in turn, it was hot even to the touch. And after 5 minutes or so, it had cooled down. And in turning, looking back here, I had the wires. They were pretty long wires, because when I run wires, put wires, and I don't know how long I want to make them, I might just make them 6 or 7 inches long, each one of them. And then when I get to the point of actually doing it, then I'll cut them to the proper length, or the length that I want. But anyhow, when this happened, after it had cooled down and everything, I was looking around on the back of the plane, and I saw that these two wires were absolutely scorched and black. And of course, I then finally realized that, well, the plus and the minus had gotten together, and there was a dead short, and that's what caused these lights to start smoking. But again, once I separated those two wires, put masking tape around them, or electrical tape, just to separate them. I didn't want it to happen again. And I plugged the battery back in, turned the lights on, and this strip came on just perfectly. It was just as bright as it was before. Anyhow, so my point of this is that these LEDs are really tough, and you just can't seem to burn them out. I suppose you could burn them out, but I don't know how you could do any more damage than shorting a direct short. Anyhow, it didn't hurt them. They still work great. All of these, the LEDs up here now, once you've actually, well, okay, let me back up a little bit. Once I decided what I wanted to do, I cut these LEDs out, and I actually taped them with masking tape to the plane. I then started, I had this side of the wing off and on my workbench, and what I would do was I would actually take, with the wing laying down, I took this strip loose, and actually then laid it down on my workbench and did the soldering there. As soon as I got that soldering done on this particular thing here, and what I would do also, as soon as I did a soldering, I would use where the power comes in, I would connect the battery to it and make certain that nothing had happened, that this strand still worked, and that now power was flowing into this strand. So every time I did a soldering, I did a check of it before I moved on to the next place. And I would suggest that you do that too, because you don't want to get all your lights on and then you plug it in, and half of them are off, and then you go back and find out which soldering joints were not good enough. I think that pretty much covers that. Oh, and I also, as I made these soldering, and like this one, once I got this soldering done here, then I taped the underneath side, taped it back in place temporarily. Did the same thing all along. And when I got the whole entire plane done like that, then I was ready to actually take the LED lights and permanently stick them to the plane. Now, the LED lights on the back side, it's a small strip that you peel off, and then there's adhesive on the back of this string, on the back of all the LEDs. And once you pull that little strip off, then you merely push this down tight, and push them in, and it sticks in place. This is very tight. I don't have any tape over the top of it or anything to hold it in. The adhesive is doing its job. And of course, at that point, when you're putting them down permanently, that's when you're actually, before you're moving this around, you know where you want it, and that's where this little curlicue comes in, because you can adjust the exact spot that you want these in. So I think that pretty well, I believe that pretty well covers it. Oh, the one thing that did happen though, I remember now, that when this shorted out, what happened was about a week later, my on-off switch quit working. So I did have to order. So I'm assuming that that dead short, and the juice flowing through this switch was a little too much for it, and it weakened the switch, and eventually it quit working. So I did have to order a new on-off switch, which I also got. That came from Hobby King. And as a matter of fact, I just checked the price before I did these videos this afternoon, and this little on-off switch is like 95 cents. So well worth the money. So I believe that covers it. I did this particular part, or part 2, I had to, this is the second time I've done part 2. The first time I did part 2, I took it to the computer and I couldn't read the file. It said that the quick movie or whatever program it is that reads the file and shows it on the screen, it couldn't understand the file, so I had to delete it and redo part 2. I hope I've covered everything. I think I have, and I know that there are, in fact, I wanted to have this in 3 parts, but I found when I was doing the next part of it, the next, I guess it's going to end up being part 3. At the end of part 3, my battery on the camera ran out of juice, and it just cut that video off short. So I had to create a part 4 to finish the presentation up. Part 1 got cut off because I accidentally pushed the on-off button on my camera. Like I said, if I had a person holding the camera, I wouldn't have these problems. But anyhow, that's the end of that. Please go ahead and look at part 3 and part 4, and I hope that I have answered, like I mentioned in part 4. I hope that this does answer some of your questions and helps you out in your project. And I do believe that I'm pretty certain that in part 4 I mentioned about the LEDs, and this, if I've mentioned, not part 4, part 3. I think I mentioned in part 3 about the ability to cut through these strips, and if I did mention it in part 3, then you're also going to hear it here too. But I'm going to cover it just to make certain, because I can't remember. Anyhow, right here, you probably can't see it, but there's 4 little dots, and those are the dots that where you do the soldering. And there's a strip, there's a little line right between there, and that's where you can actually cut the LED strip into 2 separate pieces. And there's a mark there's a mark there, here's another one. Every 2 inches there's a place where you can cut. So you can have your LED strip as long as you want it or as short as you want it. So that's the flexibility that you've got there. So that's it. That ends part 2, and I hopefully this part 2 will be readable by my quick movie program. Because of course the next step is to, if the videos and everything are okay, then I'm going to download them to YouTube. So that's the end of this. Please go ahead and watch parts 3 and 4. Thank you.